Being recorded.
I just did.
Being recorded. Okay, we are live. Amen, amen, amen. הילדים שלי. שלא ישו את הסריטות שלי. שיחבקו אחד את השני. אמן, אמן. ילדים שלי. We're gonna get Facebook set up.
Hi.
Hello, Jen. How are you? Good evening. Many. We're being recorded. We're going live on Facebook, many. We're live.
Yeah,
So it's time to join the program.
but what if I don't want to join a program?
Good evening, Laura. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Many, we're about to start. And you know what that means, correct? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started at 7 o'clock. One last share on Facebook, and we are good to go. Okay. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Good evening, Michal. Good evening, Ruth. Good evening, Jan. Good evening, Margot and Chagai. Good evening, Noah. Good evening, Yaakov. Mendel Batashvili is in the house, sitting here in the shul of Bozeman. And for those that need to know, know. Those that don't know. But he's sitting right here in Bozeman. And it is Parshas Eikev. It is a third portion in the book of Deuteronomy. And we're actually going to start right at the beginning of the Chumash, right at the beginning of the Torah portion, which in the live Chumash that we use is page 1109. And again, just as a reminder, a refresher, the book of Deuteronomy of Devarim, Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah, the fifth of the 5 books, is actually a book of Moses. That Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, in the 37 days before he passes away, he gives his last will and testament to the Jewish people, hopefully knocking some sense into them before they go into the land of Israel. And right here at the beginning of Parshas Eikev, it says, and what will happen is, as a result of your listening to these laws and your care in their observance, God, your God, will keep his promise, the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your fathers. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you, He will bless the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, your oil, your cattle's offspring, and the best of your flocks, and the land which he swore to your forefathers to give to you. You'll be blessed above all nations. There'll be no sterile male or barren female among you or among your cattle. God will keep every sickness away from you. He will not give you any of the diseases of Egypt which you experienced. Rather, he will give them all to your enemies. It sounds like a dream come true. If you follow God's command, and here in the Hebrew it says V'haya ekev tishme'un, which translates as, well, we'll see what the translation could be, but on a most basic level, it means as a result of you listening. Ekev in Hebrew could mean as a result of. So as a result of you listening to what God tells you to do when you go into the land of Israel, you'll be blessed in all these multiple different ways, which are incredible blessings. But of course, we are Jews, and we are layer Jews. We're Jews that try to dig deep to understand what the Torah is emphasizing. And there's a very, very basic teaching about the word ekev, which normally translates as a result of. And what is it? So Rashi, and let me just open up here. Rashi says that the word ekev can also mean, we know in Hebrew, the Hebrew language, words can mean more than one thing. So even till today in modern Hebrew, ekev can mean as a result of. Hu yoshev bakele ekev, he's sitting in prison because of his wonderful deeds. But ekev is also a body part. Which body part? Your heel. Like, exactly, Mendel. So like when Jacob was named Yaakov, because Esau held on to his heel. So what would heel have to do with mitzvahs here? What would be the connection? If you'll be like a heel, God will bless you. So Rashi says, and I quote, and it's a foundational teaching of Rashi, and we're going to elaborate on this teaching so that when we walk out tonight, we're going to understand a very fascinating thing, which I only discovered today in my learning. So it's a good thing to know that at 41, you always learn new things, and then I get excited because I get to share it with you guys, right? If I told you I knew this all my whole life, it'd be boring, but I'm just as excited to you because it's brand new to me as well. Rashi says, "Ima mitzvah is kalos, she'adam dash ba'akev," of those easy, simple mitzvahs that people trample on with their heels, tishmu, and you shall follow them. So Rashi's saying that what Moses was conveying to the Jewish people was a foundational idea. What is the foundational idea? That even mitzvahs that seemingly are simple or easy, that we could trample on them with our heel, meaning they're no big deals, that we don't give them enough credit. Those are the mitzvahs that Moses was reminding the Jewish people to follow. And here, in this incredible talk from volume 9 of the Rebbe's edited talks, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. I just have to tell you one more piece of information. And once you have that piece of information, the journey will start clicking. So number one, the most basic understanding of the word ekev means as a result of. Number two, ekev could also mean a heel, which reminds us that even mitzvahs that we would stomp on and squash with our heel are still vital. And number three, this era that we find ourselves in, this period of time that we live in today, is called by the sages of Israel, it's called Ikvasa de Mashiach, the heel of Mashiach. What does it mean, the heel of Mashiach? We'll get to that too. But it's what it refers to is the end moment, just like the heel's at the bottom of the body, and that's it. It's the heel's the one that takes you places. This is the moment that takes us into the era of Mashiach. So we're on the heel, we're on the edge of the precipice of an incredible transformation and transition into the coming of Mashiach. So you have three pieces of information. Let's see how your ADHD / anxious / screen addicted brain can handle this three pieces of information. Ekev as a result of, Ekev the heel, and Ekev Ikvasa de Mashiach, the heel era that transitions us into the coming of Mashiach. before I get to the teaching, I want to make a debunking. I love doing the debunking program. We've had many, many conversations at our Shabbos table, at our Shabbos Kiddush, in classes about why in today's day, in religious Jewish circles, people seem to be more religious or more bigger zealots and bigger, well, in their observance, they're more strict than maybe they were 50 years ago. I look at pictures sometimes of the way my mother's classmates, when they went to Beis Rivka, when they went to the primary Chabad girls' school in New York in the 70s, in the early 70s, how they dressed. And I smile because compared to the way we dress today in the religious circles, they would be considered super modern. Their dress code was way more lax than Chavi's generation of women in Chabad. And the normal observation that we make is, why do people in our generation have to be so super religious? Why do they think they're more religious than the people that came before them? Why, we try to use we always find the leniencies of the past and use them as an excuse to cool us off in our observances of today. And to be honest, I'm one of them. Meaning, I look at picture albums, I look at digital pictures that I've taken from my father's, from all the thousands of Kodak pictures that my mother developed, and I had them all scanned, and I have them all digitally, and I look at them, and I'm like, they were very religious, but they didn't have so many of the overdose of spirituality or overdose of religiosity that we hear about today. You open up a Jewish magazine today, an observant Orthodox Jewish magazine, whether it's the famous ones like Ami and Mishpacha, and they're more religious than Moses. And you ask yourself, what's up with this? Why do they have to be religious zealots? So I want you to put that on the back burner for a moment, because when you're going to leave class today, I'm not saying that I'm defending what goes on today, but I will give you, based on this teaching of the Rebbe, a different way of looking at that observance and how it came to be that in today's day of all times, in a time when the world seems to be going to hell, when it comes to morals and ethics and sanity and what's normative culture, specifically in this era, we find that people's observance is so strong than ever before. No, not at all. So here's where we're going to go with this. God promises through the prophets, if you study the books of the prophets, whether it's Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel or Amos or Micah or Malachi, your famous guy Malachi, not the island in Hawaii, but the prophet. If you read the prophets, you know that God says, "L'yidach mimenu nidach," that no Jew will ever be left behind, which means when Mashiach comes, every single Jew, and for that matter, every human being, is going to be following God's commands. And they will do tshuva, they will become repentant, they will repent, they will return to God in a process of getting closer to the Almighty. And it actually works very well with what Rashi says about the mitzvahs that people stomp on with their heels. What do I mean by that? So Chassidus says as follows. What was the difference if you wanted to observe, if Seth Robbins sat down for coffee with Mendel, or if Nick sat down with coffee with Margot, and you wanted to assess how was mitzvah observance when the temple stood in Jerusalem, or when the tabernacle stood in the desert, when the divine presence was shining in all its glory, and it was revealed to all how God's presence shines in all its glory, whether it was the few hundred years that we had a tabernacle, 40 years in the desert, and then in Israel, in Noven Givon, and in Shiloh, and in Gilgal, and eventually when King David, makes the plans, and King Solomon built the first temple, which stood in Jerusalem for 410 years, and then the temple that Ezra and Nehemiah built, Ezra and Nehemiah, that stood for 420 years, 830 years there was a temple in Jerusalem. And before that, there was hundreds of years of a tabernacle. How did mitzvah observance look then, when all you got to do is look out your window or step up to the temple and you see God in all his glory, this divine revelation, versus how mitzvah observance is today? When there's concealment, there's darkness, and even within our own selves, we have a hard time revealing our own core, our own essence, which is a God particle that exists within us. Yesterday morning, I got a call from a Christian fellow that I'm very good friends with here in Bozeman. And first he asked me a practical question about one of my neighbors. a business question, and then he asked me, he says, and then he didn't ask me, he says, Rabbi, I just want you to know I prayed for you. I said, tell me why. So he said, because I was talking to a pastor a few days ago, and I asked the pastor how he's doing, and he said he's in the dump. Why? He says, because it's hard to teach people religion these days. Nobody's interested. Spirituality is very hard to convey. And so I figured, I know you, Chaim, and I know you're a rabbi, and it can't be easy dealing with humans and Jews. So I prayed for you that you should succeed, and that God should keep you strong, because you need the strength in this crazy world. So it was beautiful. I was very, very grateful. And then he says, I visit with my grandkids, and one of my grandkids asked me, how come they don't get to see God? And I remember the story from the Tzemach Tzedek when his grandson came home and was crying that how come God revealed himself to Abraham and didn't reveal himself to him. And his grandfather told him, when a 99-year-old Jew has a circumcision, he's worthy of God revealing himself to him. So here I have a guy on the phone saying to me, Rabbi, my grandson is asking me these good questions about how come he doesn't get to see God. I said, listen to me, tell your grandson that he does get to see God. Every time he goes on a hike in Bozeman, every time he goes to the Grand Prismatic Springs, and every time he goes up to the end, he gets to see God. And the more time we take to see God, the more we're able to see him. And he paused and he said, Rabbi, that's a good one. I don't know why, it sounds so basic, right? Kid says, I want to see God. And what do you say? No, we can't see him because, no, of course you can see him. Just go out and look for him. Now going back to this, I'm done with the phone call. What was the difference between mitzvah observance when there was a divine glory revealed in the tabernacle and temple and today? So what Chassidus explains is that in the days of the temple, there was this great revelation, and therefore doing mitzvahs was easy. Why? Because you felt the pleasure and you saw the satisfaction, the divine satisfaction that happens, and that the light that is created by you doing the mitzvah. In other words, you saw the light that permeates every mitzvah, and therefore when you actually observe the mitzvah, you're able to feel and experience its holiness, and that's very pleasurable. And if it's something pleasurable, you're naturally inclined to do more of it, so it's easy. Right? When I go to eat sushi, which is my pleasure, not divinity, my pleasure is sushi. No one has to sit there and explain to me and say, Chaim, oh, this piece of sushi is going to taste amazing, and it's going to feel good to your taste buds. Or as Hanalea last week, Hanalea told me, but you know what those white things on your tongue are? They're taste bugs. B-U-G-S. And I didn't even correct her. I'm like, you know what? She's still 5 years old. She's not even 6 yet, almost 6. Let her enjoy the innocence of saying taste bugs. But when I don't need someone to explain to me the pleasure of sushi. In the days of the Beis HaMikdash of the temple and the tabernacle, no one needed to be explained that when you do a mitzvah, you're connecting with God. They felt it, they saw it, they experienced it, and therefore it was easy because the pleasure was tangible. They felt it in their bones, they felt it in their heart. When we're in exile and there's no temple, especially in the era right now, Ikvus and the Mashiach, the heel time before Mashiach comes, which is the lowest, where society goes, the lowest you could ever imagine. By the way, it's not such a novelty. When you're a chassid and you look at the world and you say, oh my God, the world's going to hell, or the world's out of their mind. Yeah, of course it is, because we get closer to Mashiach, the world goes more bananas. It has to be the darkest era in order for us to really appreciate the light that comes. But what happens in those dark eras is that we don't really feel the holiness of the mitzvahs. So why do we do mitzvahs today if we don't feel the holiness? Why do we do mitzvahs if we don't feel it? We don't. When you put on tefillin, you see and feel and experience the divinity that's glowing in the world as a result. And if you do it, by all means, you're a temple-like Jew. I don't. So why do I put on my tefillin every day? And why do I daven 3 times a day? Why do I keep Shabbos? Why do I keep kosher? Why do I go to the mikveh? I go because I have total devotion to God's command. Not because I enjoy it. Not because I feel this internal bond with the mitzvah, because this is who I am. I do it because I was told to. And in the time before Mashiach comes, when the world is so dark, almost no one, maybe a few tzaddikim, but almost no one is doing a mitzvah because they feel like they're all holy and godly. Right? You ask people, when do you feel spiritual? I don't know. Don't ask me that question. I mean, again, I have moments where I feel more in tune, feel more emotionally connected. But as a whole, I do spiritual, because God tells me this act is spiritual. Feel spiritual? It's a loaded statement, feel spiritual. Some people claim they feel spiritual. They do some hocus pocus. Right? Some people, they say, oh, I do breath work, and I feel spiritual. Baba Mises. I do breath work. I just started recently. Javi encouraged me. It feels good. I know that it's doing good for you. It feels spiritual. I feel like I'm out of breath when I'm done. That's what I feel. That's exactly what I feel. So then why we do it?
Do it more.
Maybe.
Until you get there.
But why do we do it? We do it with such Kabbalah soil. Today, there isn't a Jew in the world that when they put on their tefillin, they light their Shabbos candles, or they fast on Yom Kippur, they're not doing it because they feel the divinity of fasting. They're doing it because God said so, and they want to be connected to God. And that is an incredible devotion. Oh, so which one's better? To do it in the days like the temple, where you're actually having satisfaction and pleasure, and you see the light, and you feel the light, and you experience the light, or today when you do it and you feel garnished, nada, you do it because God said so, you schlep the shul again because and you feel like it's a burden, and you do it anyhow. I don't want you to come to shul because of me. I don't. I've said that 1,000 times. But sometimes Jews come to shul because they feel like that's where they belong. They don't know why. They're sitting there, they chose to be there, and they feel like it's a burden. So why are you there? Because I have to be. So which one's better? The one who feels all spiritually giddy, or the one that does it because God said so? Says the Rebbe in this talk, there's an incredible value of doing it the way we do today when it's dark out there versus doing it the way it was done in the temple. What is the value today that outshines the way it was then? Is that then, when they did it in the temple days, they had a lot of their own personal interests embedded, right? Guys, I'm going to give you an opportunity to check in on something beautiful. See that? Look at that neshama. He's sleeping by our Sinai. I did it with the Facebook. I'm going to see if I can do it with the laptop without disconnecting anything. You see behind me? Hold on. I don't want to lose you guys, but you got to see this. Check it out. See that? See that beautiful soul who's asleep at Torah class, but he's at Torah class, right? So why is he burdened to be here? I didn't even ask him. He asked me if he can come. He's here as a prop for the topic of the class, right? So when the temple stood in Jerusalem, you had your own personal interests involved. It feels good. I see the light. I know I could tell the accomplishment when I do the mitzvah. I see the light that shines from it. Oh, of course I want to do it. So it lacked the total self-transcendence, right? What is bittul? We always say bittul means nullified or subservient. No, bittul really, my friend Daniel in Pittsburgh taught me that bittul means self-transcendent. It's not about me. In the temple days, you couldn't help yourself because there was so much visibility, so much revelation. You saw what you were accomplishing. You felt what you were accomplishing. So it became a lot about you, not just about God. But in today's day, when it's dark and we don't have the same revelation and we don't see all the light that's being accomplished with our work, then we don't have our own agendas involved. There's no ulterior motives. It's just me and God, and I'm doing it because that's what God asked me. And that's a level of bittul. That's a level of self-transcendence that you can only accomplish when there is no temple, when you are in a dark ghost, and you're in Ikfus of the Mashiach. You're in this end days, the final days before Mashiach comes. But here's where there's a practical difference between the two. What's the practical difference? In the days of the temple, because you saw what the spiritual delight was created through your mitzvah, and you knew the value of what level of light, of infinite godly light came to be through your mitzvah, you could end up being your own judge, jury, and executioner and saying, well, I'll do this mitzvah because I know when I do this mitzvah, the pleasure and the light is so much. This small mitzvah, I mean, it's not a bad mitzvah, but it doesn't give the same amount of light. So because there was revelation, our judgment calls ended up being very much from a selfish perspective, but what we think is more valuable, instead of saying, hold on, why is me in this picture altogether? God asked me to do this, and this. I don't get to only do two of them because I know how spiritually valuable they are. The other two, I back out because I don't see their value. Today, when it's dark and we have no idea, what gives more value? Fasting on Yom Kippur or eating matzah on Pesach? Putting on tefillin or not cooking hot water in your kettle on Shabbos? Picking one Shabbos a month of not driving to shul and sleeping over at the rabbi's house, or sitting in a sukkah on the 7 days of sukkahs and eating and drinking only in the sukkah? I don't know. By the way, I'll tell you right now, don't ever ask me that question. Of all the questions you can ask me, don't ask me about value of mitzvahs. They're all equally valuable to us because we have no idea, because we don't get to see what they saw in the temple days. So what ends up being the result? That Rashi says that mitzvahs, kalish adam dashba keva, that mitzvahs that people stomp on with their heel, the small mitzvahs, we end up observing them specifically akev in the heel time. Which heel time? The heel time before Mashiach comes. We're observing those mitzvahs with devotion and love and total selflessness, because we actually have no idea what has which type of value. So we end up doing them all with the same level of devotion. Now, how does that come full circle to what I said about the way we observe mitzvahs today, with sort of an extreme force of observance and no moderation and no leniencies? When the Jews of today, in this dark world that we live in, we don't know which mitzvah is more valuable. Modest dressing, right? Dressing modestly, not going to the beach where it looks like you forgot to put on anything before you went there, right? Basics, dressing modestly, or keeping kosher. Keeping kosher, Rabbi, it's so hard. Really? It's harder than dressing modestly? I'm not so sure. Keeping kosher today in America, you go to Walmart, 9,000 items that are kosher. Dressing modestly is dressing modestly. It's not the end thing to do. Yom Kippur this year is on a Monday. It's Sunday night and Monday. Oh, Rabbi, I really love Yom Kippur, it's so important, but it's Monday, I can't get off. Baba Maisa, can't get off. Every one of your coworkers has 87 days of sick days and vacation days and Hakachainik days, and they're off for Memorial Day, Labor Day, Juneteenth, pick your President's Day. Every month in Gedanishtik, America has a holiday that no one knows why they're celebrating. You think if you came to your boss and said it's Yom Kippur, I need off because it's the holiest day on the calendar, your boss is going to say no. And if he does say no, get a new boss and file a lawsuit. Don't stick with him. File the lawsuit and get a new boss. My point is, we don't really know which mitzvahs, which values. So what happens in our generation is that we take everything equally. So you look at Jewish families today, and they're like super duper observant, more observant than the Jews, the holy Jews with the long beards in the 1950s and 60s. Weren't necessarily as super. Today, for example, in America, there was an acceptance already, I think in the 50s, maybe 60s, that no observant Jews in America will eat meat that isn't glatt kosher. Because you could have kosher meat that's not glatt, where you're not overly inspecting the lungs to ensure that there's no issues with the lung of the animal, which means there was an organ that was unhealthy, which means the animal isn't kosher. There's glatt kosher, which, by the way, for the record, glatt kosher can only be for meat. If you ever go to a cheese or parve restaurant and on the sign it says glatt kosher, run as far away as possible, because it means they know nothing about kosher. Chickens can't be glatt, fish can't be glatt, and dairy can't be glatt, and vegan can't be glatt. The only glatt can be on meat. But today, American Jews accepted glatt. In the 40s and 30s, they didn't have that luxury. And they knew, if you can check it this way, that today, Jews don't know. We all accept glatt, end the story. Right? The Chabad rabbi moves out to Montana, or moves out to North Dakota, or moves out to the Virgin Islands. It's an accepted thing that that family will never consume food that isn't glatt kosher. Pat Yisrael, meaning any bread or baked goods will only be baked by a Jew. Bishul Yisrael, any food that is worthy of being on a royal banquet, or is not eaten raw, which means the cooking is very valuable because you would never eat that item raw. That's the two definitions in halacha. It has to be eaten by at a royal banquet, and or you wouldn't eat it raw. If it's eaten raw, then it wouldn't matter that someone cooked it because you would eat it anyhow as a raw, like an apple. But if it's cooked, if it wouldn't be able to eat raw, then the cooking is very valuable. So then we wouldn't eat it. It has to be cooked by a Jew. It's called Bishul Yisrael. No, the fire has to be turned on by a Jew. And then there's, of course, Chalav Yisrael, milk that was observed, or milk, either the milking process was observed by a Jew or it was actually milked by a Jew. So in halacha, there are differences. The Chalav Yisrael is more strict than bread, Pat Yisrael. So eating a bag of pretzels that isn't baked by a Jew, but it's kosher, is not as complicated as milk. But any Chabad family wouldn't touch any of those. I'll never forget being on a flight, and I won't say the rabbi's name because he's a senior rabbi and he's more holy than I am. But this was the conversation. I was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into my gig in Montana. I was 27 years old. At the time, Northwest Airlines was flying from Bozeman to Detroit and from Detroit to New York. And I was going for the Rebbe's yard site Sunday morning. And I get to Detroit and I get to board my flight. And the senior rabbi who I knew from my days in yeshiva in Detroit is on the same flight. So we get seats next to each other and we sit and we're talking for the hour-and-a-half flight from Detroit to New York. So he asks me about how I get food, and I tell him, at that time we didn't have kids, but I tell him we get everything imported. And I said, even our baked goods, our breads, our pretzels, our cookies, we get that imported. Whatever we need, we get imported to make sure it's Pat Yisrael, that it's baked by a Jew. And he goes, wow, it's very impressive, because when we went out in the early 80s, especially for our kids, we weren't so careful about giving them bread. The bread, as long as it was kosher, was okay for the kids. And I, in my zealot New York extremism, said, and you guys did keep Chalav Yisrael? The milk that you drank was kosher from a Jew? And he goes, of course. I said, what do you mean, of course? In my book, either you're all in or you're all out. Either you follow all the rules, milk from a Jew, cooked from a Jew, baked from a Jew, glad or not. And he says, oh, you young guys, you're such radicals, but I love it. That's what he tells me. You're radicals, but I love it. And I thought about it. I've shared that many, many times since, because of course, halachically, there's a difference. But to me, as a young guy, I'm like, hello, what do you mean I'm gonna have lower standards? Why? Do I know God likes this or God likes that? I don't know. I got to go with the best I can on all levels because we just don't know. It's not the temple days where I can see, oh, this mitzvah's worth this mitzvah's worth that. They're all, God says, do it all. I can't judge which one's more important. Just got to do it all to the best of your ability. And that is the beauty, that's the beautiful side, not the negative side. The negative side is, oh my gosh, this generation became such extremists. You know, people weren't always so crazy about the religion, but that's only one side of it. I'm not saying it's a wrong attitude. I'm just saying there's another way to look at it too. And that is, this generation, especially before Mashiach comes, is dealing with such a dark world with no revelation of godliness when we do a mitzvah that we have no choice but to just go all in. And when we go all in, we're just recognizing that we don't know what's behind every mitzvah that God gave us. And we're just going to say, you know what? He gave it to us. I'm just going to do it. Maybe this one's more important, less important. I don't know. Let's do them all. So it's actually, to me, I always wondered why we as in the Orthodox Jewish community, the observant, the religious Jewish community, why we became a little too crazy. And I think I figured it out today. There are people that are just crazy, so they use religion as an excuse. I'm not talking about those people. Those are people, if you took away the religion, they'd still be crazy. They'd be in a cult. They'd be they'd do something. If they weren't Jewish, they'd be Hare Krishnas dancing in the street. Ashram. I was in Ashland, Oregon a few weeks ago in Medford at the farmer's market, and Javi wanted to check it out before we went to the airport. And there was two guys standing with megaphones, screaming from the New Testament and telling people literally, I haven't heard this. 25 years ago, since I left New York, I haven't heard someone literally screaming at people, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe it. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is really going to go over well in Medford, Oregon, and in a place of progressive ideas. The way you're going to get people to want to have a relationship with God is by telling them that if not, they're going to go to hell. Boy, you really know your crowd, right? But that's not how you get people. On the one hand, there are certain people that will always be crazy no matter what their religion is. But there's a big segment of Jews that They want to be 100% with God, and because we don't have the revelation that we used to when the temple stood, we're just going to go all in. And I think, for what it's worth, that based on what I learned today and what I'm sharing with you, that lesson of Akev, of the heel, is that it's a very, very valuable thing. Because the alternative is where people become basically their own God. Right? And then they end up telling you things like, I don't think God would ever blah, 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 or my God would never blah, blah, blah. Who hired you? What do you know that I don't? What revelation have you had that I didn't, that made you decide that this mitzvah is worthy and that one isn't? At least when I don't do a mitzvah or I fail at doing something, I know that I'm a failure. So I know I need to do tshuva. But if you never think it's important in the first place, you already decided it's not important. Now you don't even have to do tshuva. There's nothing that matters anymore. Just do whatever you want. And I'll end with something very cute on this theme. For those of you who remember, in June, we had a Chabad conference here in Montana of all the Chabad families in early June. June, when you were the driver for 3 days straight, Baruch. And during one of the sessions, the rabbi from Orange, Connecticut, Rabbi Shia Hecht, we flew him in from Connecticut to Shir. His father had hundreds and hundreds of personal letters from the Rebbe. He was one of the Rebbe's closest confidants in the New Haven area in Connecticut. So he came literally for 12 hours to share with us some of these incredible answers. By the way, just for your entertainment, I wasn't going to share it, but we're talking about it. He shared that in the 1940s, a member of his father's congregation in Connecticut, in New Haven, asked his father that he said, I want to have an Orthodox wedding, but I don't want to have a chuppah. So from all people's problems, that's a new one to deal with. So he didn't know what to do. I believe he asked the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe told him to ask a pulpit rabbi who maybe has dealt with similar situations, and he recommended that Rabbi Hecht, Rabbi Yitzchak Hecht, talk to his brother who was a rabbi in Chicago. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Hecht. So he sends his brother in Chicago a postcard, a telegram, whatever they were called, and says, I have this guy who asked me to officiate at his wedding, but he doesn't want a chuppah. What should I tell him? He gets a telegram back a couple days later, and this is the response, okay? Tell him to go to hell. In hell, there is no chuppahs. That was what his brother's response was. And why am I laughing? Because in the 40s, you can get away with telling that to someone. In other words, don't sit here and play games with me. Today you have to walk on eggshells. You have to explain to them that, in tradition, there's a chuppah, and it means the spiritual angels are circling your chuppah. You give them some whole drasha, and hopefully by the time you're done, they'll say, okay. Back then, he's like, here, you want to know the real answer? You're a putz. And go to hell, because in hell there's no chuppahs. Now that I'm done with this story, I'll tell you what happened here in Bozeman. So he was talking about a specific spiritual matter, about a chassid and a rebbe, and Chavi was arguing with him. It was this incredible back and forth, Rabbi Hecht and Chavi going at it, I don't know, for 20 minutes. Everything he said, the minute he was done, Chavi's like, but what? She let him have it. And after about 20 minutes or so, he looks at Chavi, and we're all sitting, all the rabbis, and he goes, Mrs. Brook, listen here. Either you're in or you're out. There's no two options. You can't do both. Either you're in on full force or you're out. And his message was, you don't get to pick. There's a program. There's a program of Torah. There's a program of mitzvahs. There's a program of Hasidus. There's a program of what it means to be a Chabad rabbi in Rebbetzin. And this is the program. And Chavi was the first one. All of us fought with these big smiles. Why? Because that's what we all needed to hear. We needed to be reminded that in today's day of darkness, the world has enough wishy-washy, moderate, parav, neutral losers. The world is full of neutral behemoths. They never give you an opinion. They'll walk on eggshells and hakya chainik. They'll tell you whatever you're doing is okay. They'll tell you the things that you're doing that are good, that are amazing, and they'll make it. The world needs leaders. And to be a Jewish leader means to encourage people to do every mitzvah. And we don't understand them. We do them because God said so. We don't have a temple. So I don't have the luxury of knowing, this mitzvah does this this mitzvah does this. No, we have to say the truth. Every mitzvah connects you with God, whether you understand it or not. Now go do it. And if you don't do it, go to hell. Anyway, I'm sending out a telegram tomorrow. By the way, at the way the post office works these days, telegrams used to get places a lot quicker than our mail does, that's for sure. I just want to say, if I send one to the Chicago now, it'll come back here in 2027. So this is the message, one of the messages of the parsha. Those mitzvahs that we stomp on, that we think are not so valuable because while we were sitting on the can or sitting on our couch, we decided that mitzvah is not so important. For whatever Baba Maisa reason we gave ourselves, stop selling yourself short. You're royalty. And there's a rule that says on every recyclable can, it says no deposit, no return. You want return? You want all those blessings that it said over here? He'll bless your fruit of your womb, the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, your oil, your cattle's offspring, the best of your flocks. Then you got to show up. And how do you show up today? Doing every mitzvah equally with the same oomph, with the same enthusiasm, with the same devotion and selflessness, because we don't got a clue about what the value of each of them is. And that is the action. That is the behavior. Those are the mitzvahs that are going to bring actually an end to this golus, an end to this rotten dumpster fire of an exile, and usher in the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speeding our days. Amen. Now I hope you're encouraged, enthused to have a rockin' rest of the week. Just a public service announcement. We will be missing, I will be missing class for a couple of weeks. Next week, our family goes away as we try to do each summer to have some family time. And so if you don't get an email on Wednesday, it means there is no class. And so I apologize. Chabad.org, Jewish.tv, there's plenty of class on there. You go to our YouTube channel, which is Jewish Montana, and there's classes going back a year and a half, 2 years. You can always catch up on an old class, but it's good. They told me in regards to the laws of family purity that absence makes the heart grow fonder. So in your absence, when you miss me so much, you'll be yearning to see my glorious face when I get back. And I look forward to seeing all of you then as well. Sei gesund, and we'll see you back soon.